Hello everyone, welcome for joining. We'll start in 2 minutes. Great, because we have a jam-packed event for you today, I am going to begin. So welcome everybody for joining our event, Shaping the Future of Food Systems for the Youth with the Youth. And what an important time to have this event. In a decade of action, we have less than 10 years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is really the year of action for transforming food systems. So our objectives for this panel discussion are: one, young people to discuss with the Committee on Food Security members and stakeholders issues relating to its ongoing programme of work. Our second objective is an opportunity for young people to identify actions needed to be taken to help support the uptake of CFS products, but also to be able for CFS to be able to take stock of concerns from young people related to food systems and cross-cutting issues along food systems. We also want young people to be recognised as really important stakeholders at all levels of decision making. Because we also need to have action on food systems to produce healthy, nutritious food for all in a sustainable way for both people and planet. We have a really great panel of speakers for you today, all youth speakers who are in the room. But it won't just be your normal panel. It's going to be a really interactive panel, but don't worry, you don't need to turn on your cameras or you don't need to even speak. We're going to be using a format called Mentimeter. So this is a really fun session, we hope, but also a really productive session more than anything. So if you go to mentimeter.com, www.menti.meter.com, you can see it at the top of the slides, and type in that passcode, that really long number beside the Mentimeter link, and it should bring you in to a really interactive session when it comes to the Q&A session. And my colleagues will be providing links and reminding you of how to get involved when the time comes for the Q&A. So without further ado, let's get into some interactive pieces before the Q&A. So these are pieces to get to know you. So again, visit www.mentimeter.com and put in that passcode and then type in, where are you from? So we have France, Zimbabwe, the Netherlands, Nigeria, Italy, Philippines. Wow, Mother Earth, we love to see it. Brazil, the USA, we're all over the globe. New York, Trinidad. Wow, Kenya. Amazing. Welcome everybody. What a global event we have. Philippines is really popping up there. We've got a lot of people from the Philippines here today. You are very welcome to our session. So this just goes to show how global our session is going to be today. And we're really going to get viewpoints and opinions from all over the globe. So now I'm going to go on to our next question to you are, what are your pronouns? Because we want to be as inclusive as possible. So please tell us your pronouns so that we know what to call you or how inclusive our event really is. So great. A lot of she's and hims. Brilliant. Oh, we have quite a balanced room. Great. Thank you, everybody. Very balanced room. That is great to see. And our next question for you guys is, what is your age group? And for the people who I see have just joined the room, please log on to www.menti.com and put in that code, and you'll be brought straight in to these fun interactive questions where we're just getting to know you guys. So what is your age group? Okay. It's quite a young group, but I see a few young at hearts towards the end of this graph. 26 to 35-year-olds, we have the most. 15 to 25, you guys are more than welcome in the room and we'd love to get your opinions. But of course, our 56 to 65-year-old person, equally important. And this really goes to show an intergenerational group we're going to have here today. So how exciting. And now we are on to our speakers. So the way this session is going to be run is we are going to have young speakers throughout the session. We are going to have 6 young speakers for you. Our first young speaker, who will be speaking about youth entrepreneurship and giving us a business perspective. But before I bring her to the stage, I just want to talk about why we are having this event focused on young people. It's because young people are increasingly visible, but we are already changing and working in food system transformation. We are really taking to the stage. As I mentioned before, we have less than 10 years to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And many of us have taken matters into our own hands because we see change happening, but not at the pace it really needs to go at. So we have 3 stories of 5 minutes to set the tone and show what young people are already working on to change the food system. So this is Maureen. Maureen is a young social entrepreneur. She is the founder of Tulavema in Kenya, and she'll be giving a business perspective for you. So Maureen, welcome.
Thank you, Sophie, for the great introduction. Let me just confirm, are you able to hear me well?
We can hear you very well.
Perfect. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation and to see the great regions that we all come from. I'm really excited for this event and really glad for the organizers who saw it fit for them to engage, for them to set up a meeting or an event for young people to engage and discuss on matters food systems, because as young people who form the largest majority of the population, it is important for us as the current generation and also the young at heart to maximize the potential of the youthful demographic dividends that the world is enjoying. So Sophie, as you have introduced me, my name is Maureen and I am from Kenya. I am happy to share a story with you on nutrition advocacy and raising awareness of indigenous vegetables. I want to start back when I was in in university when I was still doing my undergrad, or rather where I have my roots. I have my roots, or I grew up in a region that has leading cases of malnutrition. So this automatically led me to take nutrition as my first course to get equipped with technical knowledge of how to address malnutrition, not just from a technical perspective. And while I was doing my undergrad, I realized that there's a gap that existed between what people knew and what is on the ground, or how people viewed nutrition. So that is what led me to start as a social enterprise called Tulevyema that seeks and exists to raise awareness of proper feeding habits in communities. So what we do at Tulevyema is we organize regular nutrition health talks in community members, more so among young women of reproductive age. You may wonder why young women of reproductive age is one, because the woman is the one who is in charge of the kitchen in her household, mostly in the African setup. So once the woman acknowledges or appreciates the importance of eating well, one, she'll replicate that at her household level. And also because of the talkative nature that women we have been blessed with, they will tend to share this knowledge. So it will not be nutrition knowledge that they have acquired and just applying this knowledge at their household level, but they'll also share with their friends, with their family members. And I mean, information is power. And if I have information and I'm not sharing it, it's not helping me. So that is why we mainly work with young women. And apart from that, from the nutrition health talks, we also raise or seek to localize nutrition, because you find most of the time nutrition is often viewed as a very expensive lifestyle, because eating well is almost synonymous, or is perceived to be synonymous to eating exotic food. But is this really the case? Not really. So this is why Tulevyema exists to localize nutrition. Nutrition, or to raise awareness of locally produced foods, and also promote production and consumption of locally produced foods, mainly the indigenous foods such as sweet potatoes, arrowroot, pumpkin, cassava, yams, anything that is locally available in your region, purely based on your region, is what we seek to promote. Apart from that, at Tulevyema, we also train the young unemployed women of reproductive age to set up vertical gardens to cultivate 4 varieties of indigenous vegetables. The 4 varieties of indigenous vegetables, they use them, they are fast for household consumption. So we also seek to improve household food security, and then they sell the surplus to meet other household needs, therefore also empowering these young women economically. Sophie, you talked about the objectives of this meeting. Of this conference. One way in which young people can get involved is by them actively aligning or seeing the different positions in which they can occupy in the food system. We all do not need to be producers. We can be distributors. We can be aggregators, and finding passion in what you want to do and joining networks such as the Sun Business Network are one of the ways in which young businesses or young people can get involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maureen. And I love what you said. If I have information and I'm not sharing it, I'm not helping anybody. And sometimes we see so much information collected in the research space and then it's left on the shelf and it's gathering dust. So this really grassroots-led initiative of sharing information and promoting the consumption and production of local indigenous foods is of utmost importance to achieving any goals that we've set out for the next less than 10 years. And I think you've really brought us on really quite well to Pierre. So Pierre is a young person working for the World Food Programme. He's been working there since 2017 in the headquarters. He has worked on many fill the nutrient gap assessments in the Sahel, Burundi, the DRC, Mozambique, Ecuador, and has recently moved to Nigeria to lead the analysis there. So Pierre, please take the stage.
Thanks, Sophie, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and having this opportunity to advocate for inclusion of youth in shaping the future of food system, particularly advocating for adolescent girls. So 3 billion people cannot afford an healthy diet, and among those, adolescent girls are particularly vulnerable and often fall out of the targeting thresholds from the different sectors. So too old to be considered as a kid and too young to be considered as an adult. Next slide. Fill the Nutrient Gap is a systems-focused situation analysis, which assists countries identify how best to support consumers improve their diets. We clarify the magnitude and the nature of the nutrient gap to understand why there is a low intake of nutritious foods. Once we have clarified the magnitude of the problem, we try to understand what are the main drivers. Is it a problem of availability of nutritious foods, physical access, affordability, or consumer choices? So I'm not going to talk about the methodology of this assessment, but rather sharing some results. So for those of you interested in that, I would invite you to go to the GalleryView website and search for the Fill the Nutrient Gap page to see videos, briefs, and reports from countries. Next slide. So we articulate the Fill the Nutrient Gap assessment around the food system. You can see the 3 pillars of the food system: the supply chain, the food environment, and consumer behavior that results in people's diet, which ultimately impact nutrition and health. With the Fill the Nutrient Gap assessment, we try to understand the reason for poor diet quality. Now, looking closer at the adolescent girl on the next slide. So first, I would like to explain why the adolescent girl is considered to be vulnerable. Using the adult man as the reference, so the pink line on the graph, we compare the minimum cost an adolescent girl has to spend to cover her needs. In all countries listed, we can see with the gray bars that the cost of covering her energy needs is lower than the adult man's one, because an adult man's need more kilocalories. Now, when looking at the blue bars, for the cost of the nutritious diet, we can see that in all countries, it's more expensive for the adolescent girl. It can be up to 3.5 times more expensive to meet all her nutrient needs than for the adult man. In practice, it will mean that when the meal is put on the table, the adolescent girl should get 3.5 times more nutritious foods than the adult man. Talking about meat, fish, dairy, fresh fruits and vegetables. However, we often see that intra-household sharing is in favor of the adult man and not the adolescent girl. So having an adequate nutrient intake is a real challenge for her, and she needs support from the different systems. Next slide. As we see on the graph, targeted supplementation through the health system can make a significant contribution to the adolescent's nutrition intake. Indeed, iron and folic acid supplement will meet 100% of the adolescent's needs. A multi-micronutrient tablet in the lighter blue bar can meet the needs for up to 15 different micronutrients, making a great contribution to the adolescent girl's overall nutrient needs. Next slide. A diverse and nutritious meal tailored to the school children's needs, including adolescent girl, can make a significant contribution to ensure the adequate nutrient intake. This is an example from Rwanda, switching from a starchy heavy meal to a more diverse and nutritious meal, including dried fish and green leafy vegetable. Also, it's important to note that targeting specifically adolescent girls through the education systems has shown positive results on girls' school attendance, as well as pushing back early marriage and pregnancy. Next slide. In Burkina Faso, the adolescent girl was targeted for a Food for Asset national program. She would receive 1,200 francs per day in cash in exchange of working in the community 6 days a week. Even if some of the cash would be spent for non-food items and for other members of the household, there still is enough money to cover the cost of a diet. It is also important to enable the adolescent girl to make the right choices on how to spend this cash through social and behavior change communication campaign or messages. Fresh and nutritious food voucher program instead of the cash can also make a great contribution. Next slide. Finally, shaping the future of food systems requires attention to the most vulnerable individual. A consensus is needed on priority interventions and policies. We need to align multi-sectoral engagement to create the synergies and leverage the opportunities. We also need to work towards strengthening government's policies and programs to improve delivery on nutrition. With the right investment, with the effort of all together, we can shape sustainable food systems for tomorrow's generation. Thanks, everyone. Over to you, Sophie.
Thank you so much, Pierre. I really appreciate that you mentioned multi-stakeholder engagement and the importance of really strong policy and policy creation, because that's why we're here. We need more young people working and helping to create those policies and to sit at those decision-making tables and to really take ownership of the decisions that are going to lay out their future. So we have a really great speaker now called Jim. Jim is the chair for the Youth Alliance for Zero Hunger, a member of the 16th high-level panel of experts of the Committee on World Food Security, director of Agritech 8-Layer Technologies, Inc. He is from the Philippines, and he is also a steering committee member of YPARD as well. So if there's anybody to talk about multi-sectoral and stakeholder engagement, I think it's Jim. So Jim, please take the stage.
Thank you, Sophie. Good evening from the Philippines and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I would like to say that this is a very unique opportunity to be in that space, as what Sophie alluded to, being in different sectors at the same time. And really looking at how in the experience that I've had in the past year as part of the writing team for the HLPE report on youth, is that my experience in working in the youth in agriculture policy advocacy space, as well as in the agribusiness and agricultural research space through the years, I don't bring only an individual experience into the report, but also the experience of fellow youth advocates coming from different sectors and really feeding into that science policy space of the HLPE, which we hope that would trigger policy shifts in across the food systems. And so one of the things that I'd really like to highlight is the importance of digital infrastructure in addressing the digital divide. Given that we are here right now in a virtual space, we see that a lot of young people may not have the same access to connectivity as some of us have here in this specific room. And I feel like that's something that we need to emphasize, that governments have to look at investing in digital infrastructure to address any pre-existing socioeconomic inequities that may inhibit young people to be heard and be enabled to participate in policymaking processes or sharing their experience from on the ground or even making their voices heard. In relation to digital solutions, one of the things that's crucial given the context of COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, we see that there is a need to build resilient supply chains. And looking at one of the solutions, and it's not a silver bullet solution, rather, I would like to highlight also the need for traceability systems in terms of food, that we would establish transparency and integrity across supply chains. And one of those solutions is traceability systems, and that's one of the things that our group at 8-Layer Technologies, the Agritech department, is working on, is that we've partnered with GS1 Philippines, which is part of the global federation GS1 that works on the barcoding system of different products. We've launched a partnership that would work towards creating a traceability system in the Philippines for food and agricultural products. And lastly, I'd like to focus on the policy engagement spaces where young people can be heard. It's important to recognize the rights, the agency, and the equity of young people in the food systems. And it's important that we create the necessary mechanisms for young people to be heard, for young people to be able to speak into the policies that would affect them down the line, because they will have their own families and they would want to see a specific kind of food system that they want their families to live in. And so one of the examples that I'd like to share is the Youth Alliance for Zero Hunger's initiative that we're hoping to launch by the end of June, which is called Unite. It's a discussion series that will establish a dialogue or a space for young people and policymakers to come together in an informal venue and just to share their experiences and their gaps that they see on the ground. And hopefully these discussions could turn into recommendations that policymaking bodies such as the CFS or even other intergovernmental bodies that could help shape food systems for young people. And so hopefully these are policy recommendations that we hope to see young people being highlighted, not only as a token in discussion groups, but really integrating them into the planning, the decision making, and to the implementing stages of programs for youth with youth. And I really encourage and hope that if there are any UN member state representatives here, that I would encourage that mechanisms would be placed to reach out to young people and include them significantly and deliberately, so that young people's voices and experience are heard and feed into the policies that will shape their future. Back to you, Sophie.
Well said, Jim. Thank you so much. And I think you brought us really well onto our set of questions. I've been watching the chat, and there has been mention of CFS needs young people to help promote our policy and products, including volume guidelines on food systems and nutrition. And they want to hear from us how we are pledged to promote applications of CFS's flagship policy products among our governments, and how can they help? And I really appreciate Chris in the chat for asking that, because that's one of our questions that we'll be getting to on Mentimeter soon. So, oh, my apologies. So this is our first question. I'm going to ask this question to our panelists, but if there's anybody in the audience who has an answer to this too, please do let us know. So for the people who aren't aware, CFS is the Committee on World Food Security. It is a place where policymakers and stakeholders come to discuss some of the biggest issues involving food security in our globe. But before we move on to this question session, I just want to highlight again why we're here. The CFS is a global platform to discuss food security and nutrition challenges with all countries and stakeholders, including civil society, private sector, UN donors and academia. But as seen from the stories from our brilliant young people and young activists, young people are essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But young people are often underrepresented in these big arenas. While the work that these big arenas does is essential for our futures. So what can youth do to make it more successful? How can we better engage young people in the work of CFS? I'm going to put this to our panelists first. Maureen, Pierre, and Jim, would either of you like to hop in on this?
Maybe I'll go ahead and have a first stab at it, Sophie. I think after the CFS 45, I think in 2018, where much of the discussions really revolved around how to engage, attract, and retain young people in agriculture and food systems, that kind of really snowballed into much bigger discussions on how we can really transform these discussions into actions in terms of how young people are integrated into these spaces, as you would see here in this diagram. And I feel like the member states and even CFS have done a terrific job of really being intentional in terms of engaging young people, where we've now been tapped in and also have been able to interface with CFS, secretariat, plenary, and different consultative processes. I feel like that is very crucial. I do hope that there is a way, and I'm not sure how that would go, but in a way that would also cascade down into country levels, right? So at the global level, it's very crucial to have these discussions talked about, but it's also as equally crucial to translate these dialogues, these publications, these reports into action on the ground. And hopefully that would translate into what you would see in the HLPE report on youth, where there are recommendations on how, access to resources, access to markets, access to knowledge, innovations, technology, and mentoring programs as a way to build and bridge young people to different resources. I feel like those are policy shifts that we need to see on the ground. And this space of the CFS is only the entry point, and that would and hopefully that would cascade to the regional and country levels.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you brought a really good point that it can't all just stay at this high level session. It really does need to trickle down, and it needs to really reach the people who are in the most vulnerable contexts around the world. And as we said, this session is going to be as interactive as possible. So for the people who are new in the room, please go to www.menti.com, put in this lovely long code. My colleagues will add it again to the chat box and answer this question. What can youth do to make sure the work of CFS turns into reality? And if you're a young person in the room, what do you think you can do, or what do you think CFS can do to make things better, make the work of CFS reach you better? Please let us know. And your answers will come up on the screen, hopefully. More youth-led side events, here. The CFS needs to start by listening well to what youth have to say, educate people, support and educate other youth on food security and nutrition, involve young people and programs as youth-focused nutrition programs, share inputs and ideas, capacity building, provide resources such as financial resources. I think there is power in numbers, and youth tend to have a massive social media presence, which can really get even more people involved. Diversify, develop platforms for exchange of ideas, consult with youth for local needs. Capacity building again. Great, organized dialogues. Engaging with young people globally, especially from grassroots level, so their voices can be heard. Include young professionals from training on the job. Brilliant. Does our panel have anything to add? Any comments that you've seen that really speak to you that you want to highlight? Please come in.
Yes, Sophie, I'd like to add on the peer-to-peer advocacy. This is Maureen speaking. Yes, I really like that point because most of the time you find young people are doing very amazing things on the ground and from different parts of the world. But it would also be good if we all perhaps maybe from a region came together also to learn from each other, to encourage peer-to-peer learning, mostly like formation of groups per se, if I should say so, so that we can be able to exchange knowledge. I believe information is power, and no one has monopoly of knowledge. So that's a really, really good point. Thank you.
Pierre, would you like to come in on this? I saw that there was an ask for more nutrition-focused programs on young people.
Sure, thanks, Sophie. Yeah, I think I will just reinforce what it was in my presentation. Sorry, that's also sometimes youth and young people are not targeted into programs or into intervention. So sometimes they are hard to reach within the more isolated communities. And I think it's really where we can have a positive impact. And so that's also reaching out and trying to make sure that we can reach to every youth through the different systems. It can be the promotion of agriculture for youth. It can be different type of program of intervention done by NGOs, civil societies, the UN, or others. So I think there is really a room for all of us to engage and to reach to the people that are most isolated.
Yeah, and I just saw a really interesting point pop up, more youth board members. I really like that because we often find that the civil society are maybe a little bit more open on incorporating young people into their boards, but the business sector is such an important sector for growth and inclusion. And we are one of the biggest consumer networks. We've seen young people under the age of 30 and really important parts of that as well. So incorporating young people into boards, I think that's a really interesting one and one that could be incorporated. Question to the panel from Gerda Verberg. Hello, Gerda. If you're on the line, you're more than welcome to speak as well. But if not, I can ask your question.
I'm happy to speak, and I'm extremely happy to be able to participate because I like the action orientation of this panel, and I'm very proud of you. I have a suggestion and I have a question. The suggestion is that how to submit better the voices of youth into CFS is indeed come together, and the Sun movement, together with you, Sophie, because you're a part of the Sun movement, Sun Youth movement, to bring young people together in the run-up to building the voluntary guidelines and all the policy papers of the CFS. And later on to, of course, submit them to everyone so that they can be helpful also for young people to make their country a better place for everyone. My question is, how does this panel, how do you think to end the gender equality? Because gender equality in the world is still the biggest inequality that we have. Of course, we have the indigenous, of course, we have minorities, etc. But the gender inequality is the strongest. How will you, as young people, young generation, end this and make sure that young people, or that women and girls have equal access to everything, legal, financial services, land, technologies, innovations, etc. Thanks, proud of all of you.
Thank you so much, Gerda. It's always nice to have a strong youth supporter in the audience, and one that's really a really big part of getting youth involved in the scaling up nutrition movement from the beginning. We always appreciate your support. And on the gender question, that's a really fascinating question, one that's really, really prominent, and also one that I feel like is spoken about in circles quite a lot. We always hear it. It's not a new issue. It's not something that is only happening now. It has always happened. Why is it being talked about in circles? How can we move past this and really tackle it to its core? So what does our panel think? Maureen, Pierre, Jim.
Maybe I can go. Wow, that's an interesting question. But what comes to mind on top of my mind right now is active promotion of more so to improve or to reduce gender inequality and for girls and women to be involved in innovative technologies is for those women or the females who are already involved in perhaps careers like engineering, science and technology, and mathematics, to actively encourage the young girls who are behind them to take up these courses, demystifying these courses. They are often, yesterday I was listening to a podcast, and one of the speaker was saying that when they enrolled in a driving school, and the teacher who they got allocated to was a lady, and automatically what came to mind was, I'm not going to understand driving. I'll fail this driving test just because it's a lady. So also, it calls for support, support to the people who are already occupying these positions or who are taking up these careers, to encourage other young girls and females to take up these opportunities is one of the ways I see would be appropriate to encourage gender involvement, more so in innovation and technology. I'm happy to hear what Jim and Pierre have.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Maureen. Yeah, I think for me to answer the great question, I think it also has to do with education, and so really from a young age, educating children to really understand that there is no difference between women, men, girls, boy, that everyone can pursue their dreams. And I think the role that we have as organization or as individual is also advocating, but also making sure that we pass along the message to everyone, to our surroundings. And yeah, and I think it's really something on a day-to-day job that we can do. Every time we see something that isn't right, is also stepping up and say something.
Definitely. And while we have 5 more minutes left in this Q&A session before we go on to the next 3 speakers, please do connect to www.menti.com, put in that number you see on the top of the screen, and your questions will pop up here. And if we don't answer them in this session, the panelists may take note and answer them in the questions, but I want Jim to get in before.
Yeah, I'll be quick about with that, Sophie. And thanks, Gerda, for that very interesting question. There's only one word that comes to mind with that question: intentional. And I feel like we have to be intentional when we want to address, gender inequality. And so I feel like there has to be that top down and bottom up approach. It's not just top down all the time. And we have to look at creating the necessary environments where young women, even as early as they are in their childhood, is that they are already given being intentional with the programs, that the environment is made so that they can actually access education, access the necessary social benefits that every person has to be, has to have. And I feel like that's very crucial in creating a sustainable, way of addressing gender inequality. And so I think I'd leave it at that we have to be intentional, both from public, from private, from non-governmental groups. We have to be intentional, and we have to be willing to break barriers and work together in addressing and working together in those programs.
And to repeat that word, intention. Intention is just so important. When we talk about any sort of breaking silos or boundaries, that is really, really key. And I see that CSM Tyler has their hand up, and I would like you to ask your question, but please be mindful of time as we have 3 more speakers. Take the stage.
Thank you for the floor. I'm Tyler, a farmer in the United States. I practice agroecological methods, and I'm part of La Via Campesina, the largest social movement in the world. We defend food sovereignty and the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas. There seems to be an absence of a clear systemic analysis of human rights in this conversation. And so the CFS can support youth by recognizing human rights. And youth in the CFS can defend our rights by pushing against these powerful exporting countries that seek to corrupt the CFS. We also saw in the chat that the CFS Secretariat, Chris, wanted young people to figure out ways that we can contribute to the voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition. The CSM has not endorsed these voluntary guidelines for a number of reasons. My colleague Nadia will post our release in the chat. And we just have to make very clear in this event today that the side event process for this plenary was not according to the regular process for accepting applications. And so the CSM youth would have very much appreciated if the organizers of this event would have reached out to us to collaborate. And it's unfortunate that you did not take that opportunity. And finally, respecting everyone's time here, we invite civil society and Indigenous youth to join the CSM, to strengthen the CFS, and to defend multilateral institutions such as the CFS with a clear grounding on human rights. We should not be focused on profit or controlling nature. We are simply talking about defense of our rights and the rights of Mother Earth. Thank you very much. And please check out the links that we're putting in the chat. Take care.
Thank you so much, Tyler. And our apologies for missing out on that inclusive aspect for you. This is a learning process for us, and the first of its kind for us, but we will be mindful to be more inclusive of you and your groups into the future. And thank you for highlighting that concern with us. Really, really appreciate that. Now we're going to go on to our next three speakers. So we have another three short examples of work by young people to change the food system. So I'd like to introduce Cravell. She is a research officer with Y-Farm. We help you farm. She's from Trinidad and Tobago, and she's kind of bringing on a research and capacity building perspective from a different type of perspective, a more creative perspective. So Cravell, would you like to take the stage?
Thanks, Sophie. Y-Farm was established in 2015 and pioneered agricultural educational entertainment, or as we call it, agri-edutainment, with a mission to promote the importance of sustainable agriculture among youth, build their capacity in agricultural entrepreneurship, and empower them to contribute to achieving global food and nutrition security by transforming the unfavorable perception associated with agriculture among our communities as non-lucrative work into a sector which is lucrative, to counter the challenges related to food security in our communities and worldwide. Agri-edutainment includes the world's first food and nutrition security superheroes, photosynthesister, Agriman, and Agribot, whose adventures are shared in comic books and creative educational content using animations, song, poetry, and drama. Y-Farm aims to equip young men and women with knowledge and skills to identify and pursue opportunities in the agricultural sector for self-sustenance and improved livelihoods. Y-Farm intends to be one of the world's leading agri-edutainment agencies that will grow a farmer in every home. Y-Farm collaborated with national, regional, and international entities, education institutes, private sector, and volunteer organizations to facilitate community and school garden development and agri-entrepreneurship training. A module of a curriculum that I helped to develop explores different aspects of agribusiness from concept to commercialization with sustainable livelihoods along the entire value chain in agriculture. It teaches design thinking for social entrepreneurship. Another module is food and heritage, which embodies ancestral knowledge to encourage and preserve indigenous practices in growing, preserving, and consuming food. It covers agroecology, such as agroforestry, mixed cropping, intercropping, crop rotation, rainwater harvesting, environmental and human health in terms of soil types and formation, climate change, communicable and non-communicable diseases, and in particular to countries like Trinidad and Tobago, the legacy of slavery and indentureship in agriculture as it relates to environmental destruction from poor farming practices such as monoculture that focus on one economic argument, and as is contemporarily recognized neglected externalities. This module on food and heritage will also address the social impact of slavery and indentureship that led to the abandonment of labor in agriculture in our societies. The following module covers traditional structures in society that have segregated women from participation in economic sectors involved in agriculture. A project YFARM undertook for the FAO illustrated the gap in the use of digital agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago, which would be crucial to optimize production, particularly in the face of climate change. Smart strategies such as crop simulation modeling, artificial intelligence truly warrant implementation, and technology is therefore the final module of this curriculum. YFARM also established a farmers collective that provided technical support for production and market access via contribution to produce to a vegetables pack that's sold in a local supermarket. So finally, to the CFS, YFARM would recommend addressing challenges of support systems, resources, training, and capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cravell. I really love YFARM and this whole new concept of a superhero that is working for people, but working on the ground for people as an agri-culture superhero who goes into schools. And I love that School of Agriculture. That's really, really innovative and a really new way of thinking of education and of thinking of food and agricultural education for a really young audience. But I don't even think it's for a young audience. I think this would get even the older audience in and interested in agriculture as well. So now we are on to our next speaker, who unfortunately couldn't be with us, but who has left us a video to show. So Dalsho is a young social entrepreneur at Lymphoproductos Alimentares, and I can only speak English and Irish, so my apologies for my very poor pronunciation on that. He's from Mozambique, and he will be giving us a business perspective.
Greetings, I am Dolso Mshanga. I am from Mozambique. First of all, I would like to apologize for my accent here in Mozambique. My daily language it's Portuguese, since I am from Lusophone community. So it's a little bit of challenge to speak English. And second, I want to say thanks to everyone who has been involved in organizing this event so that we could all share our ideas, exchange our experiences, and also be able to learn from another. I am a small entrepreneur. I work in a family-owned business company. Here we are well known. We are known by our product brand name, which is Shikaba. Shikaba is a peanut brand that we produce and sell in the local market. As a social business, we aim to generate commercial revenue as well as provide solutions to socioeconomic problems here in Mozambique. To achieve that goal, we process nutritious food and sell to the market. By doing so, we are tackling two problems. First, it's malnutrition, and second, it's unemployment. According to a report provided by UNICEF, here in Mozambique, 44% of children suffer for malnutrition. Almost 1 on 2 children of the age up to 5 years, they are unable to reach their potential growth in both ways, physically and mentally. And this problem is strongly related to the high levels of poverty in Mozambique. As we all know, one of main cause of malnutrition, it's lack of food, nutritious food, because people, they don't only want to eat, but they want to be well fed. Since we know the financial condition of our target market, which is the low income population, we do our best to reduce our production cost, to process food and sell in affordable prices. The products that we have now available to the market are peanut butter and derivatives, cashew nut butter and derivatives. As a food producers, we're always looking or searching for new affordable ways of delivering food to the consumers, because even though people need nutritious food, they also need a new texture, color, and taste. So we need to be always innovating to offer different added value products to the consumers. With that in mind, we started to develop a strategy to reduce food waste by creating innovation. How we do that? We identified any amazing opportunity here in Mozambique. The production of rice has been increasing very fast. As a consequence to that, the level of food waste also is growing in form of broken rice. So now we're installing a new production line that will help us transform the broken rice into many new added value products. We hope to make this new idea or this new innovation a very big success. And also as a business, any business, we face many challenges. One of them and the hardest one, especially in a food processing industry, it's related to the consumer habit, because many people, they are afraid to buy new products, even though we explain the benefits of consuming the products that we sell to the market. Most of them, they are afraid to buy these products because they are not used to. So that is really a big challenge. But despite all that challenge and other challenges that we face, we are committed on doing our best to produce more food and deliver to the market. So as an entrepreneur, I hope to inspire more people to do the same, especially because individually we cannot get to nowhere. We cannot provide solutions to all problems. But if we combine our efforts, we can do something. We can provide or create any environment that is good for everyone. Thank you.
Great, and that was Dalsho, who is a really brilliant youth activist working on the ground. And I just wanted to remind people that when it comes to a feedback form, our Mentimeter is being used as a feedback form as well, but my colleague will add in any more information on how to give feedback in the chat box. So please do use Mentimeter when it comes up again. But right now we're going on to our third speaker, which is Mike, who is also involved in the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. He is also vice chair of Action Track 5 of the UN's Food System Summit. And as I mentioned, a Scaling Up Nutrition youth leader for nutrition from Malawi. So he is going to give a civil society perspective. Mike, over to you.
Well, thanks so much, Sophie. And I think being the last, if not the least, speaking on this event, I'm really amazed of what has been shared by the great speakers before me, especially from Tokotongo of the entrepreneurship in performing malnutrition, and Kavar ensuring of agriculture. So I think the model which Kavar brought in is a very good one, which can be adopted in the education curriculum if you want to inspire young people to be agriculturalists. So I'm going to give a civil society perspective about nutrition and what is nutrition all about and what are the challenges that probably developing countries face when it comes to nutrition. Next slide, please. So as you can see on the pictures, this is the nutrition that was in the past when it comes to developing countries. There were a lot of cases that has to do with goiter, that is iodine deficiency. In the middle child, which you can see, the child which is severely malnourished. So this was the nutrition in the past in most of the in the developing countries. And on the last side of the slide, you see that there's a child who is born from a mother that has COVID. So that is a cretin child. So it's a child who has severe brain damage, which who cannot walk or even talk because of the severe brain damage. Next slide. So let me present you the present now in terms of malnutrition in developing countries. So as you can see on the picture, this is a sign of overnutrition. In the past years, these were just common probably in developed countries, in the Western countries. But right now, this is just a trend right now, even in developing countries. And it's not even only in the urban setting or in town in developing countries, but even in the rural setting, because the coming on of technology and the trade, the people in the rural setting are even consuming high sugary foods and fatty food that is increasing hypertension and even obesity in these areas. Next slide. Why does it matter? Why should nutrition matter when it comes to us, the young people? So globally, you understand that $3.5 trillion per year is lost in tackling issues of undernutrition, and this is almost equivalent to $500 per individual. At the same time, getting to the Malawian context as a developing country, 59% of healthcare costs in Malawi is associated to tackling undernutrition. And recently, there's a data that has been released which shows that 23% of under 5 deaths are related to malnutrition. So this is a very global challenge, and particularly a very huge challenge when it comes to health sector in Malawi. Next slide, sorry. So what do we need to do as young people? So I'm bringing this attention of young people just because I know that young people have the capacity and the power to change things. And what do young people have to do in the next phase? Next slide. So this is the model which I have brought in, and this is actually the key theory of my project, which I'm running in Malawi, which I'm focusing ensuring that young people are key and parcel of the nutrition programming. And this can also be adopted by CBS and even other countries. So you understand that the youth are powerful change agents. In most circumstances, their ability to know and learn is very advanced than probably other people. And from the angle of that, young people are very great change agents. If once trained and once given the capacity, you understand that the majority of them are going to involve their communities, making sure that the communities understand nutrition. At the same time, in my project, the youth that I've trained, they're there to do the demonstrations in terms of cooking demonstrations, the backyard gardening, and the like. At the same time, you will learn that the youth, once given the capacity, once given the training, they'll be able to do the peer-to-peer learning or education, which is very key when it comes to tackling malnutrition. So this is the model which I brought in for us to understand that young people will be very key agents once we involve them in our program. Next slide. So this is just a picture representation of the backyard gardens. These are the youth that are trained in some of the poor local communities in Malawi, just giving them the few resources and giving them the necessary skills. They've been able to showcase different skills in terms of backyard gardening and the like. Next slide, sir. So in terms of the conclusion, where are we? Does it matter? What do we need to do? So in terms of tackling malnutrition globally, and probably in country Malawi, we are on the right path, of course, but we need to do more in order to sustain our gains. And does it matter? Yes, it does matter. As I've presented, the cost of malnutrition and the cost of hunger is very huge, and we need to do something. And what do we need to do? Jim said of the policy on how CFS can enhance the policy. So young people, if we can be engaged in the policy formulations, being the key pillars in terms of policy driven, then they'll be able to show sustainability in terms of nutrition, food security, and the like. So there's need to engage young people in policy formulation, and even the young people are being involved in the implementation of policies. So let me end up here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mike. You really hit on a lot of really important points, and then really highlighting the importance of youth created events and programs and initiatives to really get the work done on the ground, but then also highlighting how we need to be there at the high level, at the decision-making tables. And I think that's one of the pieces of information that's been really highlighted across all 6 of our panelists, the need for youth participation in every level of program creation and rollout. Now our next question is, how can we make sure CFS effectively helps address the most serious issues we are facing in food systems? Now I'm going to put this to our panelists first. So would Cravel or Mike like to answer this? And also please remember to go to www.menti.com, add in that code, and we will then go on to our next Q&A session where you can have input as well. Mike, would you like to answer this? Or Cravel?
Sure. I think that the CFS can encourage governments to meaningfully engage youth and work towards the future we want. So along the lines of nothing without us, for us. And I think transparency in governments would also be useful. I personally have experience trying to engage my Ministry of Agriculture, seeking information with no luck. And finally, I think that sustaining solicited input by keeping lines of communication open would go a long way in helping us have the capacity to meaningfully contribute to policy implementation.
Definitely, and I think your story really echoes a lot of other young people's stories, that trying to get involved and trying to reach out to governments, but always emails not being replied to, or just the thank you, we will come to you soon. I've experienced that myself. So I think our importance is in numbers. And when we gather a lot of young people together who have a really common goal, and the one thing that we all have in common is food. You know, we all have to eat all across the globe, and that importance of youth-led, youth initiative, we keep saying it, but that the importance really is there in the power is in numbers, and we have to be inclusive, diverse, and we have to be open to conversations with all sectors and all people of societies, and governments need to listen, like you said. So we have some questions and suggestions coming in from the audience. How can we get social agreement for our activity? Mike, would you like to answer this one? Or any other question that's on the screen?
So the question is, how can we get social agreement for our activity, isn't it?
Yes, I think so. Or whatever question speaks to you on the screen right now. Please chime in.
So let me just probably tackle that. So usually, I believe in the power of networking and connecting various people, stakeholders. For instance, if you are a fan of Twitter or LinkedIn, within your community or within your country, once you connect with stakeholders that will be able to help you champion your initiative or your activity, perhaps that would be a very good way to go. That probably relying on the networks that the youth that you already engage. Because once we involve the stakeholders within the social media that we usually have, that would be also another key aspect in terms of progressing in our way.
And we have a message here, work with local people, mainly the people on the ground. And I think that really links into involving young farmers in transition to sustainable food systems. And I have a question for you, Cavell, because you've worked on creating these education systems that really work for young people. What has been the uptake of your educational system? Have you found that it's really opened people's eyes to it? Has it really worked to engage local people?
Well, as you remarked after my presentation that Y-Farm's products would excite children as much as adults, that's absolutely true. Y-Farm has been internationally recognized as a unique initiative. And so it's been, prior to COVID, it's been featured at TEDx talks, summits on agriculture and sustainable food systems. And so the goal is to continue to build the capacity and build that ecosystem where Y-Farm would be able to mainstream and expand its service in all societies where it's absolutely replicable.
Yeah, I definitely want it in Ireland anyway. I think it would be such a cool education system to have here as well as anywhere else. So there's a comment here on we already have the youth who are ready, but they need funding from higher organizations. Mike, I think you've had a little bit of knowledge in this sector of trying to gain funding. How easy or difficult have you found, and do you think this is an area that needs to be improved?
Yes, Sophie, I think you're quite right. This is an area which needs to be improved, especially I'll dwell on the angle of agri-entrepreneurs. You understand that most of the youth who are agri-entrepreneurs in various countries, they don't have access to funding, which is a very, very critical challenge because even the banks cannot borrow you money because they won't have some assets and the like, which they should use as a backup. But I think the best way to possibly have funding is to use the connection that you have, or perhaps to link up with organizations that are in this in your sector that you are pursuing initiative. For instance, if you're on agriculture, you have to link up with organizations that are doing agriculture, and that would be the best possible way of creating synergies and think synergies where you can easily get your funding. But it is a very huge challenge, and it's just a matter of how you do your connections and the like. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's about being strategic as well. And also you can't ask for anything if you don't have anything. So to come with a plan and to be prepared, I think is also really important. And sometimes people forget that. I've also asked the audience are more than welcome to come in and give their opinions or even speak a little bit more to the points they have on the screen. Comments and questions are very much welcome. Just raise your hand and I will give you the floor. But in the meantime, there's this point has come up a lot, and maybe even if our previous panelists would also like to come in, and if there's any comment that they've seen on the screen, capacity building. That's been something that I've seen came up in the last Q&A session and has come up now. And if our previous panelists or Cavell or Mike would like to speak to that, is that an issue on the ground that you've seen?
Sure, I'd just say that for developing countries like those in the Caribbean, particularly in our region being small island states, we do have an issue in developing sustainable food systems based on our small size. And so one struggle that farmers do have is the ability to produce in order to sustain the society, in order to help us decrease our food imports. And so that is one area that developing countries like ours truly lack, is having the capacity to develop the skills, the technology, the techniques to be able to scale up our food and nutrition production here in our societies to be able to sustain ourselves?
I think just to comment on Kavara said, I think the issues of capacity building, especially on the angle of technology, is a very, very huge issue. For instance, in developing countries, agriculture inputs, which are high good and technology, they're very expensive and the young person cannot afford. So you look on the terms of balancing up in terms of what you can afford and what you can't afford. In the end up, you use technologies which are not sustainable. So this is a very serious issue, which maybe we need also to look into seriously.
I see, Jim, you've turned on your video. Is there a comment on the screen that speaks to you, or do you like to come in about capacity building?
I wanted to come in on that one, just because, you know, in the past years that at least I've experienced in terms of advocacy for young people and all that in the agri-food space, it seems to be that, you know, sometimes the default program for young people is always capacity building. And I feel like there is an assumption that there's always that gap with young people in terms of their capacity, when in fact, young people do already have certain capacities that just need to be enhanced or at least guided towards, you know, what their aspirations are. And I think what's more crucial is creating the necessary environment, not just capacity building in itself. And so one is to bridge them to opportunities. You know, there are a lot of young people that want to enhance their access to education, or at least better livelihoods, and I feel like those are crucial. And it's not, you know, capacity building in itself is not a silver bullet, and we have to look at it from a systems perspective as well, that we have to address social, technological, environmental, and even the policy and the rights and equity of young people in terms of how they decide what kind of skills they want to develop. And it's not just, it doesn't have to be top down all the time. We really have to look at what young people aspire to be, what young people aspire to develop from within themselves. And I feel like we have to touch base with that.
Great. Yeah, definitely. We do need to reach out more and broaden that space for inclusivity. And I've just seen that we have a hand up from WFO, Diana Lindsay. Would you like to ask a question or a comment?
I would like to come in with a comment following up what Jim just said about capacity building. I think really what we saw today in all of the speeches that were shared is that there is truly an urge at this point for youth to speak up, and especially a necessity to be heard. So we both need to work on the possibility of creating programs that do enable youth to find the right instruments and skills to speak up for themselves. I was very fortunate. I'm a young farmer from Italy. I am part of the WFO, the World Farmers Organization, and I was very lucky to participate in a program called Gymnasium that allowed me to acquire these skills. But also what I saw today is that there's really the grounds and a special moment when we can create an alliance between youth and young farmers, because the young farmers are the ones who want to work at grassroots level to create food security, to create healthy, nutritious food, to help our local environments live safely, even if this does not exclude, in my opinion, trade from one of the possibilities to provide nutritious, safe food for the whole world. And if we create this alliance with youth, understanding that we are all on the same team, I really believe that we will have a much more powerful voice and that we will find that place to be heard that we request. So thank you for organizing this panel today. It was very interesting.
No, thank you so much, Diana, for sharing your experience and for, again, highlighting the need for more cooperation between young people, no matter what their professions, young farmers, medics, nutritionists. We all do need to work together, and that's been one of the biggest issues of the past decade or even longer, that people have been working in silos. And that's what's so great about young people, is that we try and we attempt not to. And we will always strive for that betterment of working together cohesively. And now I know we've heard from the CSM, but I would like to open up the floor for if there's any UN agencies, donor agencies, educational partners, or if CFS themselves would like to take the floor and ask questions, opening that up to the other sectors in the room. Okay. I see Nadia's hand up. Nadia, would you like to ask your comment or question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Sophie, and thanks for organizing this session. I guess I really enjoyed hearing what the panelists have to say, and I'm wondering if maybe for the last bit we could try and ground this conversation into the policy process that's about to happen for youth here at the CFS, because I think that's a real important moment and opportunity for youth from the CSM, from the PSM, from the Youth Alliance, for all of us to make our voices heard at the CFS and to really engage ourselves in a policymaking process. So I've been thinking a lot about that recently. I really appreciated that you started the meeting today by asking people to share their gender pronouns. I think that's an important step towards having a more diverse and intersectional understanding of youth. But I'm curious from the panelists and from Jim, who I've met when the CSM and the PSM have organized sessions together in the past as youth. But I'm curious from all the panelists here today, how we can ensure that we have a real intersectoral approach to youth during this policy process, where we look to youth not just as entrepreneurs, but also as custodians of the earth, as small-scale producers, as workers up and down the value chain who have really been hit hard by the pandemic, as urban food insecure, as those who want to challenge the patriarchy and capitalism, as well as those who want to improve international trade. How can we make sure that all of those voices are heard and that we have a human rights-based approach to the youth policy process, especially given the real challenges we've seen from states in the voluntary guidelines negotiation and in the recent agroecology negotiation to supporting human rights and having a robust human rights-based framework. So I guess I'm curious from everybody about a diversity of youth and not just an entrepreneurial approach, and about how we as youth demand human rights be part of the instrument we're about to negotiate. Thank you.
No, definitely. Thank you so much, Nadia, and for highlighting that food security and food insecurity is really everybody's business, and it's not just an issue for one sector of society. Your actions really do have an onset effect to the rest of the globe, and to really think about that and to take hold of that human rights-based approach. And I know you highlighted Jim, so I'd like to give Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in on that. Thanks, Sophie. Hi, Nadia. Nice to see you here. And yeah, that's a very, very essential question. And I think that's something that all of us young people have to be mindful of. And what's interesting is, as we were working on the HLP report on youth, is I wanted to point to, or at least highlight to everybody here, is that we really took X number of meetings at the onset, at the start, to discuss what kind of perspective we wanted to take on youth. And we understood how heterogeneous young people are, how complex the needs are, and that sometimes even the age range is a very complex and dynamic aspect of youth in itself. And so even with that age range, kind of just looking at that spectrum, you're looking at changing and very dynamic changes in terms of their needs. And I feel like you did highlight a very interesting, a good point, that that young people are not just entrepreneurs, you know, and I came from university. I taught for a while rather, in university, and I did research and I did extension, and I still do advisory services with farmers, and now looking at this different spectrum, I feel like we have to ensure that young people from all these different aspects of food systems have to be able to speak what they aspire to. And if you go through the HLPA report, we highlighted the aspirations of young people. We highlighted the rights of young people. We highlighted the agency and equity of young people. And hopefully that the HLPA report on youth would actually cause policy shifts to happen that would address and that would actually create the necessary mechanisms for which you actually alluded to a while ago, where young people come from different sectors and to be able to speak into the policy process. And I feel like, one step foot into the door is that HLPA report. And what I'm really hoping is that once that is, launched in plenary, and the policy convergence processes take place, is that we have to be able to accept as well, young people to young people, that our contexts are different. It doesn't have to be the same all the time. And sometimes the need of one young person is different from another, and we have to be mindful of that as well. And so even not just from a top-down perspective that governments and big organizations have to know and recognize that young people are heterogeneous, we also have to be mindful of that peer-to-peer, youth-to-youth level, that our context and our needs are different, and we have to be able to sit together at the table. And sometimes that we would disagree on certain matters, but what's important is to work together so that young people together and even future generations would have a world to live in that is sustainable, that is resilient, as we've seen what the pandemic has showed what kind of food systems we have. And so we have to work together towards that. Back to you, Sophie.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about being inclusive of everybody, we have this really, really interesting question that came from the floor. How can we involve young people in conflict-affected areas? Is there something from either panels? Would you like to come in on this? It's such an important issue. Or if there's somebody from the audience who has an opinion on this question, please.
I'd just like to say that engaging them in agriculture as a means of sustenance, as a livelihood, would help stray from conflict, because in that sense, you do give them something valuable so that they aren't attracted or alluded to those organizations. And so that also develops their communities and continues to give them a life worth protecting, and therefore they would not stray. And so I think that agriculture is a meaningful way of engaging young people who are living in conflict-affected areas.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there's also a lot of really good organizations that are working with young people, such as the International Federation for the Red Cross, who are really embedded in these sort of areas and doing really great grassroots-led initiatives, and using food as a way to do so. So yeah, thank you so much, Cabal, for highlighting that. And also somebody in the chat has mentioned international networking can help those in conflicted areas, which is completely true. And now to end the session, I would like to let everybody know in the room that Act for Food, Act for Change has launched it launched on the 18th of May, and Act for Food, Act for Change is a youth-led, youth-initiated, youth-created pledge, a promise to transform food systems. It was created by 20 young people from across the globe, from different countries, different religions, different backgrounds, but with one common goal, which was to transform food systems. Jim and Mike and Maureen, who are in the room along with myself, are part of this team. And it was initiated in support of the Good Food for All campaign and connected to the UN's Food Systems Summit. It's a global pledge, as I mentioned, created by young people, but also not only a pledge for youth commitment to food system transformation, but also a pledge to get governments and businesses involved, because right now, people under the age of 30 have the longest to live with the decisions being made about their futures today. So we need to be at those decision-making tables. And we are also trying to get into those areas. Right now, it is a digital pledge, but we have members from the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts and the International Federation of the Red Cross on board, who are really trying and helping us to gain access to those people who maybe can't pledge online. So we are trying to get to those people. We really need and urge you to log in to our website and to pledge to transform food systems. And then you can also funnel down into 17 actions for change, which were also created by young people from across the globe, from different organizations and networks. And these are 17 actions that young people want, not only young people to commit to, but also, again, governments and big businesses and agencies. These are the things that we believe will really change and shape the way people look and work with food into the future. And I'd really like any member states who are in the room to also get involved. The Irish Department of Foreign Affairs has been really supportive of us, and Minister Simon Coveney from Ireland has pledged his support, and we would love other member states to get involved. And to do so, you can get in touch with me, Mike, Jim, or Maureen, and we would be more than happy to have a conversation with you about this pledge. So again, please, all young people in the room, all people young at heart in the room, do pledge to commit to transform food systems. And also, I would like to remind everybody to share your feedbacks and remarks before leaving. You can do so through Mentimeter, but we're also monitoring the chat for any feedback, anything we missed, any criticism, but we also appreciate the love. So please do share anything with us. Thank you so much for attending our event today. Thank you to the amazing panelists that were in the room and to the people who were brave enough to take the mic and ask their questions in person. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks all.